Welcome, I'm the Cornish Knitter. A few weeks ago, I've got a lot of new subscribers on here, so I thought it would be quite fun to invite you to ask me any questions. So those of you that are new here can get to know me a little bit better without scrolling through the backstory. So yeah, you submitted lots of questions and here I go. I'm also going to touch on the top 10 series because again, you provided me with so much information about what you would like to see in a top 10 video, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. So join me for this Q&A, find out a little bit about me. I will have an eye on the comments and hopefully answer any questions that you have in comments too. So do please comment, do like and subscribe, and yeah, shall we get started? I have got my knitting with me because I thought it would be quite a nice thing for us to sit and knit together, because that's what I do when I'm watching a YouTube video. I often just sit and knit and sometimes just listen rather than actually watch what's on the screen. So yeah, got my knitting, a nice plain toe up sock, so nothing too complicated, so I won't go wrong as I'm chatting. So should we get going? I'm going to read these in the order that they came in. So they came in via my previous YouTube comments, also on Instagram, and some people just popped into the shop and asked the questions. So I've sort of gathered them together into sort of, because a lot of people ask the same sorts of questions, I sort of gathered them together so that hopefully I can give you a good answer. And as many of you that have watched me for a while know, that I'm pretty open about most things. So yeah, I like to be as authentic as I can be, and I won't sort of hedge around any complicated questions. So first question, how old was I when I learnt to knit and who taught me? So I was, and I've already gone wrong. It's a 2x2 rib. So there you go. I was 8. I think I was 8 when I first learnt to knit. And it was probably my grandma and then my mum who taught me to knit. And my mum's family were great knitters. Her sister was an amazing Fair Isle knitter. They could all knit. Even the boys, she was one of 9, they could all knit, and I think probably that was part of her generation, you know, being young, growing up during World War II. I think they learnt to be really resourceful. So yeah, so they taught me to knit, and probably the first things that I knitted were teddy bear scarves and blankets, or dolly blankets for my dolls. I used to love playing with dolls. I love train sets too. But dolls, I used to play with them for hours and make their beds. And so I suppose those were the first things I learnt to knit. And when I learnt to knit, it was all straight knitting pins. Circular needles had not even been thought of in those days. And well, it's just a very different hobby to the one it probably is today, because I had a break from knitting. I knitted up until I was probably about 24, and then work and life got in the way, you know, had children, like so many women come into the shop, and it is predominantly women, I have to say, come into the shop or contact me and say, you know, oh, I knitted when I was younger, but I gave up for about 20 or 30 years. I'd love to start again, but I'm looking at it and thinking, it's completely different. What happened to the knitting that I knew? And when I sit down and we get sort of started on projects, they quickly realise that actually the techniques are the same. It's just the construction of the garments have changed and how patterns have written. So yeah, so I've knitted since I was 8, but I did have probably about a 20-year break myself when I had children and I was working away, and yeah, just life got too busy. And then I rediscovered it. And I want to say I rediscovered it because I was working away from home quite a bit, working in London, and I sort of had plenty of time in the evenings on my own. So, and there were some amazing yarn shops near where I worked and lived in London, and yeah, I started to go into those and think, oh, I'd really like to to have a go at that. And I'm trying to remember what the first thing, when I picked up my knitting, what was the first thing? And I have mentioned it on here before, and I can't for the life of me at the moment remember what it was that motivated me to start again. But yeah, so that's when I started, and that's who taught me. And it sort of leads on to, because somebody asked me how my mum was. If you look back an awful long way through the back catalogue of videos, you'll have seen me and my sister chatting with my mum on the beach, talking about how resourceful they had to be sorry, I was just looking at my knitting again, how resourceful they had to be with during the war years and afterwards, when things were so short in supply and, you know, nobody had any money to buy anything. So my mum is fine, thank you. You know, my dad's getting frailer. I've shared my dad's story a little bit on here, and yeah, he's getting much frailer, and mum is at 92 is having to, like many, having to pick up a lot of the sort of day-to-day caring duties. But she is amazing. She is active. She cooks from scratch every day. She loves going out. You know, dad can't get out and about very much, but as soon as mum gets an opportunity, she's you don't have to ask her twice, put it that way. She's out and about, and she's still knitting. She goes through peaks and troughs with knitting, but she started knitting again, and she's got 2 great grandchildren, one that's about to arrive and one that is 3 years old, and she knitted something for the soon to be arrival, and then the 3-year-old had grown out of an Aran sweater that she'd knitted for her before. And mum loves knitting Aran. It's the thing she loves knitting. She didn't knit this, by the way, because I know some of you are going to ask what I'm wearing. This is a really vintage pattern, and I don't know what it is. My cousin Linda knitted this in just a plain yarn, which is a merino with some cashmere. You know, it's well worn. You can see it's well worn, but I love this sweater. It's so warm. It's got like a boat neck. It's knitted in pieces. And for the life of me, we can't find the vintage pattern that it came from, which is such a shame, because I do love this sweater. Yeah, so my mum loves knitting Aran, so she's knitting her great-granddaughter now an Aran cardigan, and I dropped the wool off to her, or my sister dropped the wool off to her Saturday mid-afternoon, and I dropped something around to them after I finished at the shop about 5:30. And she was already halfway up the back of this cardigan. She only knits on straight needles. She refuses point blank to knit on double pointed or on circular needles, but she does a blooming good. Her tension is so much better than mine. So even. She's such a neat knitter. She sort of holds the needles different to me, and she's always sort of saying, why do you hold them like that? You use up too much energy. And she's super fast at knitting. So, but thank you for asking. She's good. So the next one I'm going to talk about is, people have asked me, how did the shop come about? And then asked me some questions about how much did it take to set up a yarn shop, and what work is involved. So we opened Stitches and Cream, and we being me and my sister, together in 2019, at the beginning of 2019. And it came about because I was working in London, and I had got to a point where I'd always lived in Cornwall, but I got to a point where commuting up and down to London was really beginning to get to me. The job was beginning to get to me, if I'm truthful. And I was getting to an age where I was thinking, do I really want to keep doing this? And I sort of had handed in my notice. I decided to hand in my notice, and because of the type of job I was in and my level of seniority, I had to give quite a bit of notice. I think it was 3-4 months, something like that. So I handed in my notice, and I was thinking, where on earth am I going to get the lovely yarn from the, you know, I'd be going into these beautiful yarn shops in London and thinking, I'm not going to be able to get that at home. And at the time as well, especially, there were no natural fibre yarn shops in Cornwall or Devon. That has changed now, thankfully. There's more around, but so I'd sort of mentioned something to my sister about, oh, I'd love to open a yarn shop. She said, I've always wanted to have a fabric shop. She's a really keen dressmaker and a very gifted dressmaker. So that's how Stitches and Cream was born. It was a discussion over coffee in her dining room. And by chance, I'd already secured the domain name of Stitches and Cream. In terms of work involved, there was a huge amount of work involved, and my goodness, have we learned a lot, or have I learned a lot. My sister left the business 3 years ago. She decided to retire. She had her new grandchild, who I mentioned. She wanted to spend more time with her, naturally, and also the fabric side of the shop was not as successful as the yarn side was, and we'd taken a decision that we were going to sort of sell off the fabric stock that we had and the sewing stock that we had and focus on yarn, which my sister does knit and crochet, but she's not a keen knitter or crocheter, and it wasn't her first love, and it just felt the right time. So nothing, no upset, nothing wrong. We're siblings, we fall out occasionally, but like all siblings do. But yeah, it was just a decision. It was the right time. She wanted to spend much more time with her grandchild and her husband, and we decided that it would be a good time to part ways. I mean, she was in here Saturday, so she still comes in and sort of sees me, and me and my sister see each other virtually every other day, so we're still very, very close. But in terms of the work involved, I mean, trying to get yarn, if I just talk about the yarn side, the fabric was something else, because fabric, you have to buy like 15-meter bolts of fabric in one go, and we took a choice that whatever we sold was going to be high quality, as natural as possible. We needed to know the provenance. It needed to be small businesses as much as possible that we worked with. And yeah, the fabric was sort of a huge resource, because you had to buy so much quantity of it. And if it didn't work, then you were left with a lot of it as well. Yarn side, I was more confident because I knew yarn, but obviously, as a yarn shop owner, you initially buy in what you like. Why wouldn't you? So it was very much looking at what I like to work with and the reasons I like to work with that yarn, and then purchasing some of that in. I mean, initially we did work with some indie dyers who were on a sale and return basis so that we could fill the shelves. And we got in a limited stock of things like needles and notions, just to get us started and just begin. We allowed ourselves probably the first year to really sit and assess what worked, what didn't work, and reevaluate at the end of that period. And really that first year was about, just seeing if it was going to work. Falmouth is a busy town in the summer because it's very much a resort. But was it going to be sustaining itself in the winter when it was only locals around? For example, we're not a big city. We are a small market town in the depths of Cornwall. So it's not like we were opening in somewhere like London or Birmingham or Oxford or something. It was actually, can we make it work? So initially, investment wise, it cost us about 20,000 between us to open the shop and stock it, if I'm really honest, and it was, an investment from both of us into not just the stock. We had to refurbish the original premises that we were going into. It was in a terrible state. We had to do an awful lot of work. We were so lucky. We had loads of family and friends sort of chip in, help us a lot, and that helped us get it off the ground. So, you know, it's not cheap to set up. Wool is expensive, and some, even as a, buying it wholesale and as trade, and some yarn suppliers want you to buy a minimum amount of stock, which can be a substantial outlay. So, and making sure that you have enough for sweater quantities, and, just thinking about seasonal type yarns, the cottons and the linens in the summer, and then obviously the more woolly wools in the winter. And we didn't have a massive amount of storage space either, and we still don't. We've got a much bigger shop now, but the storage space is still quite limited. But we stuck it out for a year in our original premises, and then we knew it was going to be successful, yes. And during that time, we got the online shop open, which I am so relieved about, because within a year, COVID had struck. So there we were. Been open for a year and we were in lockdown, and that was hard, but thankfully, because we had our online business, we were able to sell online. And as many of you know, there was a big boom initially in sales online because of the pandemic. People had time to sit there and work on sort of handicrafts and projects, and some people picked it up for the first time and some people went back to it after a long time. So that was sort of the thing that saved us during that time. And then through a series of lockdowns, we were about to reopen again. We had a massive flood. Water poured down from the back of the property, swept underneath the floor, lifted the floor. Didn't damage much stock, but it meant that when other shops were opening, we had to stay shut for an additional 2 months whilst all the remedial work was carried out. So, these things that you don't anticipate, setting up a website, getting branding, getting to a graphic designer to do your branding can be we really did sort of work on making sure that we could sort of work with quality, but not like the top end. So you're talking for web design, a basic web design and branding, £10,000-12,000 just to do that side of things, and to have all the plugins to enable you to sell online. So all of these things came into it. So it's not a cheap undertaking. I worked 7 days a week, 12 hours a day for over a year to get this business up, running and settled, really. So it's not for the faint-hearted, and you do have peaks and troughs. We would love to sell more online. It's very competitive out there. In the UK, we are still in sort of on the brink of recession, so there's not a lot of disposable income. People are worried about interest rates and inflation, all the boring things in life, but so they do make considered choices. So if you are thinking about it, just don't expect it to be wonderful sitting here surrounded by wool. It is, but it comes at a cost, both financial and in terms of your own resource and investment, emotionally and physically as well. So, did I grow up here? Yes, I did. I went to school here in Falmouth. So I grew up here and I have remained here all my life. As I said, I worked in London for many, many years and across the UK other times, but I always had my home here in Cornwall. I would feel adrift if I couldn't come back here and call it my home. It's just part of my blood, I think. So yeah, I grew up here. I still see people who I went to school with around the town, which is lovely when you bump into them. And yeah, I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. So that's that. I just sort of mentioned that I worked in London, and somebody did ask me about my work in public health and what I did. So I left school with just O levels at the time, didn't have A levels. The situation was I needed to get job. I didn't have the opportunity to go off to university when I left school for a variety of reasons. And I went to work in the bank, and I went there to work because I was good at sport, and they had regional sports teams, and they wanted people who were good at sport to be in the bank and representing the Southwest as it was then. And so I worked there for 10 years and then left and had my son, and decided that I didn't really want the nature of banking had moved away from that sort of personal sort of service that you give. You know, you would make decisions based on the people you know rather than a computer making the decisions, and it was a real community sort of feel to working in a bank and running a bank. Now you can't find one anywhere in the UK in any towns and normal sized towns. Falmouth does not have, I think the last one is closing this month, so they don't have any banks, so that's gone. So it was a wise decision. So after I'd had my son, I trained as a personal trainer and fitness instructor and did that for a few years. I was always interested in physical activity, but also because I liked people. So it meant that I could chat to people doing personal training, and it was lovely. You know, you build relationships with people, and it was just a joy. It is growing, look. So I did that for a few years, had my daughter, and then I moved into local government and looked at how we could use physical activity to improve the health of populations. And I started working in that field, and during that time I decided that I was going to get the proper qualifications to continue a career in that. And I went through the Open University and did a degree in public health and social care, and then also did a master's in workplace health and wellbeing. And after that I specialised really in working in public health, but in working with employers to understand how employers could support people to remain healthy and well in work, but also for those people who have health conditions or long-term disabilities, how they could get into and remain in work. And through that I ended up working as a policy fellow and advisor in central government to ministers on who were working with employers around trying to reduce sickness absence and improve the health and well-being of working age people. So that's what I did, and I worked in Westminster for a number of years up until I retired from there or resigned from there. And I really enjoyed it, don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed it. I loved the people side of it. Again, I was working with people, and I was involved in research and looking at what worked and really understanding what could drive policy and how we could improve it for people. And that's what I did, and I still do, because although I've got the yarn shop was meant to be my retirement project. Didn't end up like that. I feel way off retirement. I've got so many ideas, so many plans moving into 2026, so I'm not going to retire anytime soon. But yes, but I still do some private consultancy work, working with, again, still with government or local government, but also with businesses who want to look at reducing sickness absence and thinking about how they can improve the mental health and well-being of their employees. So I still do some of that work because I enjoy it, but not quite as much as I did before. I work with selected clients. So that was my work in public health. What else have we got here? What do I do with all my knits? Well, most of my knits are knitted for the shop. So that's the other thing. Anybody that's considering opening a yarn shop, you spend an awful lot of time knitting things that you don't need for yourself or don't always want for yourself, and trying to keep up with new yarns, new patterns, new trends. So I am perpetually knitting for the shop. Very rarely do I knit for myself, purely for myself. When you knit for the shop, you tend to knit the smaller sizes because it doesn't use up as much yarn of, you know, your stock. So I'm not, no, I don't fit into the smallest size. I do like a bit of ease with my sweaters. So most of my knits stay in the shop, and the girls in the shop wear them quite a bit in the shop. It's quite a cold shop. I'm actually in the shop now, at the back of the shop, and occasionally I knit and give it away. You know, people ask me to knit things, but I'm not a lover of that. I have to knit so much for the shop. I feel a bit, well, I often feel like I'm a bit of a production line. So if people ask, they have to be really knit worthy for me to knit for them. I'm a fast knitter, not as fast as mum, but I'm a fast knitter. But yeah, you know, sock club I have to knit for. Well, I just have to knit for so many other things as well. So tend not to keep them. I haven't got masses of knits in my wardrobe. I'd love to have some of these in the shop, but so many people have tried them on now in the shop. Maybe I wouldn't want them afterwards anyway. We do sometimes sell on some of our samples. We launder them properly, and sometimes we'll sell them on if we've sort of had them for a while. Somebody asked me about if they were based in the US, where do people get their yarn from, especially online? I'm not that au fait with US retailers. The one that I'm really aware of is the Woolly Thistle, who largely stocks British yarn and also I think Scandinavian yarn, and they are an amazing yarn shop and would circumnavigate some of the tariffs that people experience in the US. I mean, we do send to the US, we charge that tariff up front so that you don't get any surprises, and we do have a lot of customers in the US. But I get that it's hard, particularly now things have changed and you know, it seems to be settling down and we sort of know where we are, but initially it was tough. But that or shows, people like to go to yarn shows and see and choose it as well. But online, if I was in the US and I wanted to buy from a US shop, the Woolly Thistle would be one that I would strongly recommend you have a look at. I know there's lots of others, great shops, but I'm just not familiar with who they are to be able to confidently say who they are. Excuse me, I'm starting to get croaky. Somebody's asked me, how do I choose the yarns in the yarn shop? I sort of said I sort of do them based on what I like to work with, which I think is a really good basis. And we really know what our customers like now after being here for 6 years plus. Yeah, it'll be 7 years in February. We sort of know what our customers are going to reach for. So we know that there are certain colours in our shop that just do not sell. Purple being one. I don't know why, it just doesn't sell. And we're not renowned for our brights. However, what I have learnt from experience is that if I choose a palette of yarn, I always ask a couple of friends who are more out there with their colour palettes to cast an eye over and give me their opinions, and then we'll come to a compromise, because I'm very aware that if you just choose what you like, it might not be everybody's taste. So I do choose British yarns as much as possible from small independent suppliers. Don't work with any of the big companies. I don't believe in that ethos. I really want to know the name of the owner and what motivates them, the provenance of their yarn, everything about them, to be able to work with them. And I hope that's how they feel about me too. But yeah, it's overwhelming when you see all the yarn, when all the yarn reps contact you, and yeah, there's some amazing yarns out there, but I try and keep to those principles. keep it British. If I can keep it local, even better. Small business, and just knowing what works in our shop, but that comes from experience, really. Getting near the end of most questions. So what do I enjoy reading? And I love a read, and I do love to read a physical book. I'm not a Kindle fan. Tried it, just don't get on with that. I like the feel and touch of a book. But I do like audiobooks as well, because it means I can knit at the same time, of course. And if I'm traveling, I always have audiobooks. So I do like audiobooks. The genres I tend to reach for, I do like a nice crime thriller, a detective book. Just escapism is probably where I'd say I'd like to be. I am so busy most of the time. I sort of really love to be able to lose myself in a book. I'm not a lover of romance. I don't like romantic. I'm not a romantic person. My husband will tell you that at all. I don't like romantic cheesy films, rom-coms. I don't like romantic books either. I'm not a lover of how they always portray women, and the sort of stereotypes that women are sort of placed in those books. So I do like a good detective. I do like a good autobiography if it's somebody that's interesting or interests me or amusing. But through the Cornish Knitters Flock, the online community, we run a book club in there, and I have read some books in there that I would never have picked up and really loved, and that has really opened my eyes to some new authors. And I've just read one, and I can't for the life of me remember what it is, but I will put it in the notes. But yeah, it sort of made me read other things that I would not have picked up before, and that's been great. And I friends recommend books to me that I will give them a go. I did belong to a physical book club before, but I found that some of the book recommendations, it was almost like people were trying to outdo each other with their literary knowledge, and yeah, it just wasn't for me. As I said, I read books or listen to books for a bit of escapism. I like the Robert Galbraith books by well, she's J.K. Rowling really, but the Strike books. Yeah, I like Peter James's books, all sorts of crime detective thriller type books are my genre, and I'm an avid reader as well. I think my last question, what would be my first knitting a sweater in the round recommendation for somebody that was first going to knit a sweater in the round and had never done it before? So we get asked this many times in the shop, and probably 2 or 3 spring to mind. I often recommend the Felix sweater by Amy Christophers, because it's in Aran weight. It's simple. It's got a tiny little bit of raglan detail here. It's a simple knit, and it's probably my go-to one that I recommend if I'm in the shop. A couple of others that I think are quite good. There's the One Sweater by the Fibre Company, and they've got some great videos that go along with that. And then probably Novice Sweater by Petite Knits is a fairly basic knit. Or Her Monday Sweater is a fairly basic one too. So yeah, those are the sorts of ones that I would recommend. Which sort of leads me on to the question that I asked last time, which is, particularly next year, I want to do, after the success of the top 10 mindless knits, which you chose those top 10s. It wasn't my choice. It was me asking you and you telling me in your droves what your favourite mindless knits were. And I sort of collated that together and put them in a top 10. I would like to do that with some other themes, and when I reached out and asked you, boy, did you come back with a lot of suggestions, and they were brilliant. So I've been collating them, and again on YouTube and also on Instagram and in the shop. And where I am now is there's some of the most popular ones, but I've got about 30 suggestions here, but some of the most popular ones was definitely colour work recommendations for people, beginners patterns, one skein patterns. What else was very popular? Socks were very popular. Summer tees, you know, knitting for summer. A couple of great suggestions. Things that I'm scared of knitting and why, which I thought was a great suggestion. Going to definitely cover that one. And then sort of how to use advents, vests, bulky sweaters, shawls. Top-down sweater was a popular choice as well. So how I plan to run these is that I'm going to try and do one of these a month. But on each one in between, I'm going to ask you to tell me what your favourite of those are. And so I can feed back to people a collective experience, because I see so many videos where the vlogger makes recommendations, but I thought it would be fun to invite you guys to give me your recommendations, and then I just share it with everybody. Including my own in there, but I think each time I'll say what's my favourite one, and then do, you know, follow up with the top 10. So I hope you're excited about that. So I'm going to start that properly in the new year, but I thought in the interim it would be quite fun, because it is holiday season coming up, and many of us have been frantically knitting for loved ones, gift knitting. But I thought if I did one in 2 or 3 weeks time, which is your favourite emergency gift knitting pattern and why. So I'm going to invite you in the comments to tell me if you've got a last minute gift that you need to knit or crochet. It doesn't have to be knitting or crochet for somebody. What pattern do you reach for again and again, and why do you do that? Would be lovely to know too. And again, I will collect those all together and try and put them in a sort of order so that we know what the 10 most popular ones are. Because I just think, you know, sometimes you're asked to something or something crops up and you think, oh, I could quickly make something. Could be a hat, could be gloves, could be fingerless mittens, could be a scarf, could be a toy, could be a mug hug, anything, you know, face cloth, whatever. But I just thought, just as a bit of fun, as it's the holiday season, before we kick off the proper series next year, it would be really fun to sort of do a video about your favourite quick gift knits for people. So do post in the comments below. I hope you've enjoyed this session. I hope you've learnt a little bit more about me and how I came to be in business and what I'm doing. One of the questions I've missed off, which was on there, is about my own health. Thank you. I'm doing okay. I still have some anxiety about what happened to me. And if you don't know, there is a previous video where I talk about a health scare I had earlier this year. Yeah, it's sort of still there, and I've had to go on the train a few times, and I must admit people must think I'm a bit odd because I keep getting up, walking around before sitting down again. So that hasn't gone, but I'm okay, thank you. And yeah, we'll continue to be here chatting away to you. And yeah, I didn't get much knitting done, but I did get a little bit of my sock. And I am going on the train up to London this week for work, so this will come with me. So all in all, I wanted to say thank you for listening, and the phone's now ringing, so it's a good time. And do subscribe, and if you want to catch the top 10 series, obviously you do need to subscribe so that you'll get to see them as quickly as you can. But please do comment and let me know what your favourite quick gift knit is and why, and I will see you again soon. Bye.